Hello everybody, Ben Larry here, and in this video I'm going to try and give a simple explanation of what the national debt is and how ridiculous it is. I don't even know how they get away with calling it a national debt, as if they borrowed it from somewhere. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Outrageously deceptive. Okay, so now a lot of people out there on the internet kind of know that banks just print money, and people know that it's kind of all just made up out of thin air, but a lot of people don't really know exactly how it works, and a lot of people do believe there is a national debt, right? Now, what happens is the in there's it's split into two departments. Let's just say here you got the government treasury department, and then there's the central bank. So the whole money system is split into those two things. The government treasury could do it all. Government treasury, but they can't borrow from themselves, so they have to create a central bank to borrow from, just to make this whole game look more plausible, okay? Just to make it look credible. So now, you probably know, in our modern money system, we don't actually have money. What we have is just, we use promises as if they were money, just IOUs. Okay? So we exchange IOUs for money. We just accept evidences of debt as if it was money. You know, central bank notes like Federal Reserve notes or Bank of England notes, they're not actually pounds or dollars. They're just promises to pay pounds or dollars. So they're just promissory notes. They're not actually money, right? But in this modern society, we accept that. You know, debt obligation, IOU, that'll do. Okay, you owe me, that'll do. I don't need the money. Just as long as you owe me, that's fine. I'll accept that as money. That's what we do in our modern system, okay? Now, so the central bank prints, like I just said, promissory notes, also known as IOUs. So in England, they're Bank of England promissory notes. It's just paper. They just print them. They're not actually worth anything. It's just a little bit of paper that says I owe you. The bank is saying they owe you. That's what it is. Whoever's holding it, the bank owes the holder of the note. Okay, so it's kind of ridiculous. It doesn't really make sense, but it is a nonsensical game. So if it kind of seems silly, good, because the whole game is nonsensical. All right, it is ridiculous from the start. Okay, so the government decides it needs more money. Okay, for stuff, and so it turns to the central bank and it says, "Can we borrow? Can we have some of your notes? Can you print some notes? We need more notes." And the central bank says, "Yeah, all right, lend them to you." And the government says, "How much?" And the central bank says, "Well, you're going to have to pay us interest. If we're going to print these notes and, give them to you, you can only have them on loan. You've got to pay interest. We're not just going to give them to you. We're going to print these pieces of paper and lend them to you. And we want interest." And the government says, "What are you going to do?" "Oh, okay." So central bank says, "How many do you want?" And the government says, "I don't know, billion." Central bank says, "Yeah, all right." And the government says, "Well, how much interest do you want?" Central bank says, "Oh, whatever, 3%, 4%, 5%, who gives a shit? We're only going to print them anyway." The government says, "Yeah, all right, whatever, 5%, no problem." Now, so the government now writes a loan agreement, as a contract for this loan arrangement. But they don't call it a loan agreement, they call it a bond. I don't know why they call it a bond, they just do, right? And they also give it other fancy names. They call it a security, and they even call it an asset. It's just a loan agreement, and they call it a bond. In the UK, they call them gilts. In America, they call them. It depends how long the loan agreement is. A 30-year one's called a bond. A 10-year loan agreement's called a note. T notes, that's treasury notes. A 1, 2, or 3-year one is called bills. So you got T bills, T bonds, T notes. It's all bullshit. It's just a loan agreement. Okay, it's all nonsense. They give it fancy names. It's just a piece of paper, right? So in a way, this loan agreement is also an IOU, because it's a loan agreement. So it's a memorandum. So the government is saying IOU to the central bank. So the central bank's printing its own IOUs, and the government's printing IOUs. These ones are called notes, these ones are called bonds. It doesn't matter. It's all paper. So the government sends this bond this loan agreement across to the central bank as a record. And the central bank considers that to be an asset because that shows that the government owes it money, right? The central bank sends its notes across as agreed. The central bank printed those notes, and now the government owes the notes back according to this loan agreement, but it owes them interest as well. And the central bank says, hang on a second, just whoa, whoa, whoa. Before we do this deal, how are you going to be able to afford to repay the notes plus interest? And the government says, don't worry about it. We're just going to tax the people. We've always got money coming in through tax receipts, income tax. The money comes in, we tax the people. That's how we're going to repay you. And the central bank says, all right, fair enough. Okay, no problem. So what the government has done there, let's just draw a line here. Let's say the real people are sort of down here. This is real people that go to work, people like you and me. We do actual stuff, real labor, real productivity, real business, real services, real stuff in the real world. And the government has promised to tax us. It's pledged our credibility and used that as the security for the loan, right? So it's drawn upon our credibility. It's said to the central bank, don't worry, we're going to tax the people. So it's pledged us, our labour, right? So basically, it's like it's mortgaging our labour. It knows that we're going to do stuff. It knows that it's going to tax us. So it looks into the future and it says, yeah, we're going to tax them. And that is the security that underwrites this loan agreement. Now, they call this the national debt. Everything that the government owes the central bank, they call it the national debt. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. As if they borrowed it from somewhere. And really, all you've got, you've got government printing bonds, you've got central bank printing notes, you've just got these two departments printing paper. In fact, most of the time it's not even printed paper. The majority of it is just numbers on a computer screen, right? It doesn't take 10 seconds to do that deal. It's like, can we borrow some money? Yeah, all right. Going to pay us interest? Yeah, all right. Send us the bond. Okay, you send us the notes. That's it. Done deal. They do it all day, every day. There's no actual substance. There's no actual value. It's just a deal. And they call it national debt. So all the money in circulation is effectively loaned into existence. So all the currency that circulates is the national debt. If there wasn't a national debt, there wouldn't be any money, because this is how it comes into existence. It's born. The money is born into existence through a loan. So there is only national debt. The national debt is not something that's going to be repaid. We're not going to ever have a positive balance. It's not like we're going to repay it and then we're going to save up a surplus. No, that's just not how it works. If all this national debt was repaid, then there'd be no money in circulation. It would all be repaid back to the source. So it just doesn't make sense. But the thing is, the crazy thing that just blows my mind is in the newspapers, on the news, they give the impression that it's been borrowed from somewhere and it needs to be repaid. I don't know how they call it a national debt. All they've done is print paper, and they give us the impression we borrowed it all from somewhere. They didn't. They just printed a bunch of paper, and they call it the national debt, and they give the impression that we need to repay it. You can't repay it, because immediately, remember, when it was loaned into existence, we got to repay interest. So then we got to print more bonds to borrow more notes to repay the interest on the last bonds. And then when the interest becomes due on that, then we've got to print more bonds to borrow more notes to repay the interest on the last bunch. And it mathematically is designed to spiral out of control. It's designed like that from the start. You can't repay it, because right from the first loan, we owed those notes back plus interest to the central bank. So it's entirely deceptive. When they talk, so every year there's a deficit by design. There has to be. Because we always owe more interest than what we've got. We've always got to borrow more to pay the interest. That's the way it's designed. So all the currency in circulation is debt from the beginning. It's all overdraft. Like I said, if you paid it all back, all the money would disappear. You can't have a surplus. That's just not how it works. It's just not how it works. But they want us to believe that, okay? So the people that control this game, the central bankers, the money manipulators, the money men, they take advantage. They issue more notes and expand the amount of money in circulation. And then they take advantage of people's greed. They extend this credit and let you borrow it so you can buy a posh car and a posh house. They take advantage of your greed. They take advantage of the fact that we want to impress the neighbors and we're going to take a big mortgage and buy a big house. And then they contract the money supply, and then they know we can't repay it, and then they repossess. So slowly, by expanding credit bubbles and then contracting credit bubbles deliberately, they slowly repossess our real energy over onto their side. They slowly scoop it up because they deliberately take advantage. They know what they're doing, so they repossess the houses every time they cause a, you know, they slowly and all the time they convert these nonsense debt obligations into real assets like gold. They buy real stuff with it. So slowly, the net result is that, after all is said and done, our real energy, we work, 5 days a week, and a portion of that is being siphoned off basically via the interest. After all is said and done, it gets slowly siphoned into the hands of the men that run this game. Okay? It slowly comes under their control. Because, like I said, if we got a mortgage on a house, uh, it's like musical chairs. There's always going to be someone that's left standing and there's not enough chairs. There's always going to be people that go bankrupt. That's the only way the game works, because there's never enough money going around to repay the interest on all the loans. That's how it's designed. So there's a constant flow of repossessions where where people are going bankrupt, they can't pay their mortgages, houses are being repossessed. That's how the game works. Is musical chairs deliberately. And they slowly repossess our private wealth slowly over into their hands. They siphon it off bit by bit. That's how the game works. That's how it was set up by central bankers. And they got the cheek to give us the impression that there's a national debt, and all it is they're just passing paper from one hand to the other. It'd be like me if I held, these keys in one hand and said, I'm lending it to this hand, and now you owe it back to me, so there's a debt, and I lend it back, and then I say, now there's more debt, and there's more debt, and there's more debt, and all you got is just nothing's actually happening. It's all a circus show. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's all deceptive. It's all designed from the start to repossess your energy and your wealth into their hands. And really, the government is just a PR front for the bankers. The men behind the curtain that control this game. They pull the strings. They call the shots. If you think that the president or the politicians or the members of parliament or the government, if you think they control this game, you gotta be kidding me. Bankers are infinitely smarter. The money men are infinitely smarter than politicians. Politicians are ambitious. Politicians got ego. Politicians want to be on the telly and be famous and and be well known. That's their weakness. The bankers are infinitely smarter than that. They know how to give politicians what they want in order to do the PR front. Obama comes on the telly. He's like, the annual national deficit and all this nonsense. Yeah, the national debt needs to be repaid because we're running at an annual deficit. We need to take tough, decisive measures to bring this under control. It's all nonsense. He's describing a ridiculous paper game. All right, entirely deceptive. But it works. They got everybody thinking that there's a national debt that we borrow from somewhere. Unbelievably clever. Unbelievably clever. If you can call that borrowing, you just got one department printing paper, you got another department printing paper, and you got them swapping them back and forth. And if you can call that borrowing, well, that's what the national debt is. That's what the national debt is.